So this is Valerie Rose Belanger with the Yale World Fellows Program, and I'm delighted to be speaking with Maria Corina Machado, a leading Venezuelan opposition politician and outspoken anti-Chavez activist. Corina was a 2009 Yale World Fellow. She was a presidential candidate in Venezuela in 2012, and currently she is a member of parliament. Following the recent death of Hugo Chavez, and on the eve of new presidential elections in Venezuela, we hear from Corina directly on the situation unfolding in her native Caracas throughout the country. Corina, we saw coverage of the massive street rally in Caracas yesterday for opposition presidential candidate Enrique Capriles. Were you there? And how would you describe yesterday's events? What was the mood on the street?
Well, absolutely. We were there. And it's hard to describe the intensity of the feelings and the energy we could all share yesterday in Caracas. As you were saying, the streets ended up being small for the amount of people that showed up spontaneously, and with a consciousness that I have to say I have not felt before during all these years of fight for freedom and democracy in Venezuela. And I say this because it is obvious for us, for citizens, that this is a struggle of the apparatus of the state against the citizens. It is not a free, fair, just process. It is a process in which citizens are getting mobilized and organized on their own and following a leadership that is calling for that spirit of struggle, for the values we share, the majority of Venezuelans share. So what you saw is a proof of what I've been insisting for years. The majority of Venezuelans want to live in a country in which justice, in which loyalty, in which honesty, in which inclusion, and of course in which freedom is possible, and in which every single citizen has the right to express what we want for our own, for ourselves, and for our country. And it was magnificent, and it ends up keeping happening throughout the country in the images we're seeing today, and I'm sure we will see up until Thursday when the closure of the campaign takes place.
Great, very inspiring. Thank you. Advanced polls show Chavez's hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, significantly ahead of Capriles. How do you think the election next Sunday will play out?
Well, that's not the situation anymore. We've seen in the last hours some polls done by companies that work from abroad, one from Argentina, and others that are even close to the government that are showing a different situation. So what proves is that trends are moving fast in a direction in which people are losing fear. Because what I've said and insisted for many years is that it's very hard to measure with traditional, conventional mechanisms such as polls in a country in which political intimidation has been spread so deep by the government and their agencies. Because people don't know who is the person or the organization that is behind when they are asked for their political preferences at their homes. But even though this fear at some level is still there, particularly in public employees, which is a big bunch of Venezuelan population, we are seeing that the most recent polls show trends closing. So at this point, I have no doubt that there is a majority that wants profound change in Venezuela. Our great and biggest challenge is that the political and the electoral system that is so widely controlled by the government, with mobilization and with citizens' will, can be overcome, and the vote of Venezuelan citizens will be respected next Sunday.
Great, thank you. The huge amount of support from Maduro can largely be attributed to his long political relationship with Hugo Chavez. If Maduro wins the presidency, would you expect a continuation of Chavez policies, or does Maduro have any sort of different political agenda?
Well, since Hugo Chavez left the country, and for many days, the Venezuelan population, the citizens, we have no information about his true state of his health and capacity to govern while he was in La Habana, Cuba. Maduro has been, in fact, in charge of the government. And I want to insist that he is actually in charge of the presidency because twice our constitution was violated by bills of the Supreme Court, which has been totally packed by the government since 2004. But the fact is that during these over 100 days of Mr. Maduro in charge of the government, what we've seen is that Hugo Chavez's mistakes and policies have deepened in terms of the mistakes that have been done in the economy. We've had two huge devaluations during this process. We are seeing scarcity of basic products reach an unprecedented levels. We've seen shortages of gas, light, water. We are seeing strikes and protests in the streets because of the rising cost of living versus the income and the minimum wage, which, as probably you know, it's a big part of the population is what it earns. Today, with the minimum wage in Venezuela, you can only buy 40% of the cost of food and for a family. And this on one hand, in terms of policies. On the other hand, you've seen Mr. Maduro deepen an attitude towards dissidents that is quite troubling, because you have seen repression growing against the students who demand free and fair elections, against workers who protest for their rights, against the media and threats to the media and independent journalists, and of course to all of us, people, activists, political leaders who dissent and who are asking to have a free and fair process next Sunday. So I believe that this is a proof of the huge and profound contradictions among the different factions at the Chavismo, the fact that they know they are weak and they do not have the majority of the government, of the population supporting them. And the fact that we've seen in the last hours sectors of the international community finally raising their voices to have respect for democratic principles and guarantees in our country. So all of this creates an environment that proves us or shows us that in that hypothetical scenario, there would be a very, very tough situation for Venezuelan citizens and for institutions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As you point out, Venezuela has very serious social and economic problems, including food shortages, high inflation, crumbling infrastructure. What could a Capriles administration, if it were elected, reasonably be expected to do about these things?
Well, this is something that is continuously asked to us, because it is inconceivable that a government that arrived 14 years ago and the price of the oil barrel was at $8 and today it's over 108. How can you be able, with all this amount of money, destroy Venezuelan economy, our production capacity, our infrastructure, our institutions, and even our social and trends and social relations? The moral destruction is probably the hugest and the biggest the hardest evil that has been done to our country. Nonetheless, in this case, I believe that with the essence and the most important element you require to build a society is trust. And trust comes from a leadership that proves that, on one hand, respects and trusts the people, and second, throughout his life and the public behavior has been consistent with their values and their actions. And in that sense, I believe that a government of Enrique Capriles could bring trust not only to Venezuelans, but to many people abroad that care for our country and that have interest in Venezuela. So I believe that from an economic perspective, our challenges will be more easy to overcome than those that have to do with the social network and values. How to bring back together families that have been divided with polarization and political ideas for years. A country that has suffered having governments that continuously look for divisions in matter of race, age, income, region, races, ideologies, religions, and so on. So what I believe is that with trust and when proving that we truly want to bring a society together, that we will have government that serves the people and not the one that uses them, we will see from an economic perspective very early and good signs.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions, Corina. How would you describe the state of Venezuela's so-called socialist revolution?
It's falling apart. It's falling apart because its values are the opposite of what the people of Venezuela share. We've seen for years I say that in the name of peace and in the name of the poor, horrendous actions have been done in history throughout the world. And in this case, in the name of the poor, we've seen a regime that has maintained more and more people in poverty and dependent on the government, because it's a way in which you create this relation or even blackmail, not only from a political but even from a spiritual perspective. When you destroy private employment, when you take away the possibility for an individual to take care of himself and have the possibility to raise his expectations and his possibilities, to his opportunities in order to be independent, and you create a whole society that can only survive from what the government gives or takes away. It is destructive and it's horrible. And actually, in these years, we've seen exactly that taking place towards Venezuelan society. And then on the other hand, you've seen a group of different interests in the Chavismo that today prove that have truly and profound difference among themselves because they are profoundly corrupt. They have created and permitted all kind of irregular, even transnational operations take place and use Venezuelan territory and even our institutions to maintain those taking place. So I believe that in those areas, and I would say a third one would be the international community. Venezuela used to be a country that was seen as a reference in Latin America in terms of conflicts among countries or groups, and we were neutral, but we were always courageous to defend democratic values throughout the hemisphere. In Central America and in the South, where there were the horrible dictatorships. And today we've seen part of, or most of these governments give back to us. But I believe that they're coming closer to realize that we need a country, we need a government, democratic, strong in their institutions and respectful of human rights in Venezuela in order to have stability in the region. So I believe at the end, this revolution, it's not sustainable and it's coming apart.
So are you optimistic about the future of your country?
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe these truly hard, difficult years have given us very profound lessons. I would say that the first is that, democracy and freedom for us that were born in a democratic system, we might have thought that we could inherit it and then give it back to our children without much work and fight. And we learned that, in order to live in a democratic and free society, every single generation has to fight and conquer it every single day. I believe that we've learned that populism is, and when it's backed by militarism and corruption, could be very, very destructive. And at the end, we also learned that Venezuelan problems have to be solved by Venezuelans. And it's a hard lesson because we expected the international community, the democratic international community of Latin America, to be much more supportive to us. But I have a good news for you all, is that today, this morning, we received letters of support from 350 members of the parliament throughout Latin America to an initiative of 15 Venezuelan members of the parliament that we are demanding for free and fair elections next Sunday. So we are starting to see in Venezuela that, after all, we're not alone. Probably some presidents, for reasons that they know well, decided to turn their backs on Venezuelan Democrats. But we're seeing that the people of Latin America, through their legitimate representatives at their parliaments, have decided to speak out. So these are moments of hope. And even though we realize that next elections in Sunday elections will take place under very, very tough conditions. They're not free and fair elections, but I trust our people. I trust our energy. I trust our convictions. I have confidence in Venezuelans. And I know that once more we'll prove the world, but most important, we'll prove ourselves what we're able to do, when it takes to fight and defend the values we share.
Thank you. And my last question for you, what are your own political plans?
Well, fight, and fight. Build the country we want for us and for our kids, and for generations of Venezuelans that are not born yet, but that I believe that their future will depend on what we do and we don't do. I mean, our generation has a huge responsibility, and we have the obligation and the moral obligation to fight and success in terms of creating a new society, not the one we had before, because I think we've learned a lot of the changes that should take place, but a Venezuela in which every single citizen is able to dream with his highest aspirations and have the opportunity to make them true. A country where families have been divided and can come back together. So I have I believe a big responsibility at the National Assembly. At the same time, Enrique Capriles has asked me during this campaign to direct all the international efforts towards this election. So I believe I will have to divide myself in several areas of work. But the most important is to give hope to every single man, woman in our country that we have learned and that we have the power to make this change take place sooner than many people believe it will take place.
Maria Corina, thank you for your time, your inspiration. It's always a joy to speak with you, and we'll be thinking about you on Sunday.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being there.